this segment, I just want to look at some of the ways that I use YouTube or video in general. It just so happens that a lot of the videos that I pull are from YouTube. And the first one I want to look at is by Gar Reynolds, and you can see the URL at the top if you'd like to follow this. I discovered Gar Reynolds a couple of years ago, and showing my students even just short segments of his videos has really made a difference in helping them do a lot cleaner job with the PowerPoint presentations they do. I'm just going to go ahead and show just a short portion of a clip here.
So we know design matters, but a lot of presentations look something like this. This is fake Latin, but have you ever seen a presentation like this coming in? Seriously? Still? Today? Right? And it's very therapeutic. If you can't sleep, just put this on. Yada-da. Put a footer for some reason, which no one can possibly read, and a website. And page number, although it's not a book. And some clip art or something that you can, because you don't want, there's empty space, we want to fill that. Because we can. So you know the rule. The rule is, of course, the 177 rule that all the books, most of the books talk about. One concept, one idea per slide, 7 lines of text, and 7 words per line. But the problem is that's what this is. This follows that rule. So could you imagine today, you may be sleepy now, but could you imagine if all my slides looked like this, it repeated basically what I was saying. Design is important. Google is great at design. Could you imagine? You would all be asleep. Right? So, never read your slides. I had a great video from Guy Kawasaki, but I cut it out, where he says if you read slides, the audience is going to quickly figure out that you're a bozo. Right? So, but that's Guy. I didn't say it. But what he means is if you're reading your slides, it's because you don't know your material. You don't need lots of stuff up there. And he's seen more presentations, more bad presentations than just about anyone, right? People are pitching to him all the time. So don't read your slides. This is something from a year and a half ago, I guess. The last Macworld in 07. And this is something I compiled and put on my blog talking about this guy. I don't like to say bad things about people, so I won't mention names. But the top 3 guys did a really good job. The middle 2 only had like 3 minutes on stage. So we don't need a long history of anything. Just come up, very energetic, really great. And the third or the fourth person down here was reading cards. And, it was reading cards. And it just, you could see people, actually a lot of people were live blogging at the time, and they were saying, who is this guy? Total snooze fest, all this stuff. You just can't read notes. You don't need that. If you know your story, you shouldn't need that. And of course, the 2 guys in the middle did a great job with that. Only 3 minutes, they knew what they wanted to say. The guy on top also knew what he wanted to say. He had prompts, but he didn't have bullet points to remind him. He knew the story, right? So don't do this. We know that, right? We can't do something like that. So here's an idea. Go back to your office this afternoon, find an old presentation. Maybe it looks like this. You have the notes view, a bunch of bullet points up there. Remove those. Put them down in the notes view where no one can see them. And maybe you make 6 slides now because there were 6 key points. Then you can put 1 key thing up there, maybe 1 visual that is not decoration but that somehow supports the point. Then the audience sees something very simple. All right? And then you have your notes if you want them. You can print them out for practicing, but you can keep it very, very simple. Well, the audience...
All right, I'm going to go ahead and pause it right there. This was revolutionary for me as a presenter because I used to be guilty of cramming as much as I possibly could on my slides. And so when students got up front and they had multiple bullet points on their presentations, and then they turned their back to the rest of the class and just kind of read these really quite boring, mostly horrible presentations, I just figured, well, that was kind of normal. The other video I showed to my students is Nancy Duarte's TED Talk.
So there's something kind of magical about a story structure that makes it so that when it's assembled, it can be ingested and then recalled by the person who's receiving it. So basically a story, you get a physical reaction. Your heart can race, your eyes can dilate. You could talk about, oh, I got a chill down my spine, or I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. We actually physically react when someone's telling us a story. So even though the stage is the same, a story can be told, but once a presentation's told, it completely flatlines. And I wanted to figure out why. Why is it that we physically sit with rapt attention during a story, but it just dies for a presentation? So I wanted to figure out, how do you incorporate story into presentations? So we've had thousands of presentations back at the shop, hundreds of thousands of presentations actually. So I knew the context of a really bad presentation. And I decided to study cinema and literature and really dig in and figure out what was going on and why it was broken. So I want to show you some of the findings that led up to what I think I've uncovered as a presentation form.
All right, I don't want to spoil the rest of it, but in using Gar Reynolds, and you even noticed that he talked about story, and then Nancy Duarte, the heart of her presentation is how to incorporate story. It really changed how I talk to my students about their presentations. And so this is what I now require of them. That the background is visually supportive, not distracting. I prefer a very dark solid or a light solid. I don't want any of the standard templates with all sorts of wishy things around them. Each slide needs to contain one dominant message or image, not many. If they want to use 3 images, I require them to do a build with one image followed by another, so that we're not trying to decide what are we doing? Are we reading the screen or are we listening to the speaker? We have to be listening to the speaker. I make them check to make sure that if they use any text, and I don't require them to use text on their slides anymore. I do want their script and their notes in the notes section, or they can type it all out in a Word document, because I need to score them, of course, on what they're saying as their presentation. But if they use text, they have to go to the back row and make sure we can easily read it, and I really try to aim for no more than 10 words per slide, preferably fewer unless it's absolutely necessary. The images need to be simple and relevant, and each slide needs to definitely not look like a slide you meant, which is Gar Reynolds' term. No bullet points. He says these are documents that really are meant to be handed out. They aren't meant to be shown visually. They're good for maybe a board meeting, but they're terrible in class for a lecture, or if you're trying to motivate or inspire someone. I ask them to exhibit principles of simplicity and restraint, that the look of each slide be unified with the slide before and after. I was getting these hodgepodgey looking things. That the message or story flows from one slide to the next smoothly, and they have a hard time with this because they're like, well, I'm not telling a story, I'm giving a report, or I'm being persuasive. And so that's the concept down here. The story format is at least that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. Get us into your topic, give us that middle portion, and then have some kind of a nice closure to it. And then I ask that their presentations, whenever possible, end with a specific action for the audience. And you can see the links here. Nancy Duarte has a website that's got some wonderful short video segments that are 3 to 4 to 5 minutes long. And even when I pull the longer ones off of YouTube, I often will show only 3 to 5 minutes, even though the full video might be 20 minutes, or in the case of Gar Reynolds, a full hour. I find that we do best if I just show a short segment. In the Gar Reynolds video I was showing you, he takes a really ugly slide and fixes it and turns it into a beautiful slide. That's it, one little lesson, and then we're back to working. So let me show you a couple of presentations that my students did. You can see this particular slide here. Let me go ahead to full picture view. She was doing a report on plastic surgery, and she really loved these hearts, and so I couldn't convince her not to use them. And so what I worked with her on was at least moving the placement of the words so that they had an impact. It wasn't just, ooh, look at the pretty picture, and ooh, look at my words. And so this is what she ended up with. Is the outside more important than the inside of a person? And she really hadn't thought. She was just so excited. She was so excited when I showed her how she could place the words so that the word person was right on that inside heart, so that the wording and the picture work together rather than being random the way they were here. And I'm not a design person by any stretch of the imagination. The other one is right here. It's a very simple change that I asked her to do. You can see that she had used bullet points, and she had quite a few ideas on this one slide. And so I asked her to please remove all the bullet points and to take these concepts and do them as separate slides with a build. So imagine this going up, and here's the presenter talking. What are you going to do? Read or listen? Read or listen? As an audience member, you're struggling. So she did this instead. Lower self-esteem. Well, that's only 3 words. I can listen to her and glance at those words at the same time. The next slide added higher anxiety and depression, then suicidal thoughts, then higher rates of illness. Okay, so this was a very small change. It was the same list. Ultimately, it's just no bullet points, and instead of seeing everything all at once like this, it was 1, and then 2, then 3, and then 4. So it's small changes that I've asked them to make. I'm not expecting them to be Gar Reynolds or to be Nancy Duarte. But I've seen a huge improvement just by giving them a few strategies. for how to build a better presentation, and then expecting them to practice, 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 so that they don't need the cards that Gar Reynolds was making fun of, and so that they can stand in front of their audience, speak to their audience while the PowerPoint is behind them, and not rely on the PowerPoint to somehow be their presentation.